All right, welcome back to the Design Build Hunt podcast, which is presented by Whitetail Partners. We've got Greg on the line today, Tim and Sam, both in Wisconsin. Guys, welcome back to the show. I'm excited. We have not done a property design review here, and it's been a little while. We did a lot of them, then we took a little bit of a pause, and I think we have found a worthy one to come back to. Greg has one from Washington. Now that doesn't fit. When I think Washington, I don't think whitetails. I've got to admit, I think blacktails, right, out on the coast. But I do not think whitetails. Greg, tell me a little bit about the whitetail population, just as a foundation here. What does it look like for whitetails out there?
Yeah, so this was really fascinating, actually. I know we've talked about this on previous episodes. I'm out here for the summertime with my wife. She's a travel nurse and she's working out in Seattle. And we had this lead come through on our website about somebody who was looking for some help on their property. So it worked out well that I was able to meet up with him. This is over in Eastern Washington, and they own some property out there. And it actually sounds like over the recent years, they have actually unfortunately had some wolves around the area, a few wolf packs that have taken out some of the mule deer. And with that happening, the whitetail have kind of came in and filled that void in any suitable style habitat. So as far as the numbers go, I don't think it's crazy high, but it does seem like it's on the rise, which is part of the reason why the landowner here was interested in developing some habitat, because there is an increase in the whitetail population. He really loves whitetail hunting, and although there may not be a ton of deer, there are some beautiful bucks out here. He's had success on some really good bucks. He really enjoys getting to know more about the whitetail. So this was a really fun property, and I'm excited to see what comes of it, just because of the quality of bucks that he does have running around out here.
Yeah, I'm curious to learn just a little bit about, one of the things that sets us apart from some other groups maybe is our regional expertise, right? Like we're all kind of in different regions that are our focus. As an Ohio guy heading out to Washington, what were some of the bigger things that maybe were a little different than they were back home?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing is just the vegetation style and the habitat here. Not nearly as much timber, a lot more desert style habitat out here. So it was it was different in the aspect of, in Ohio, I'm more so focusing on removing things, like removing habitat structure and trying to influence travel by taking out timber and removing timber to add in food plots. And where out here, it's more of that open habitat where we are focused on adding that style of habitat. So I would say that would probably be the biggest difference.
Got it. Got it. And this property, for a region that does have some desert type of habitat that you're talking about, it looks like it's got a lot going for it in the way of having some water on the property. So lots to work with here. But guys, Tim, Sam, anything that you want to ask Greg before we dive too far into the actual design?
One of the things that I think is good to have for context and working in such a variety of places is the makeup of habitat and of the topography and some of those things. So I think highlighting a little bit more on that of what's going on here maybe will help give some context too. And I don't know if you want to close out your toolbar there on the left with that info and just scroll in a little bit to show what's going on with the contours and that sort of stuff.
Yep. So for the property as a whole, we have a big ridge system here in the middle, that basically where all of these little orange bedding pockets are, that's going to be a north and south facing ridge. And then we have the creek bottoms, as Josh mentioned, down here, which has very lush, thick forest in them for right around I'd say 50 to 100 yards on each side. So you'll see that's where we developed a lot of the food, the travel, and our hunting setups, and kind of left the center portion of the property with all of the bedding up on this ridge system as like that sanctuary type feel is what we were going for here.
Greg, I had a question for you too, just because I'm not familiar with the area. Um, Tell me a little bit about, I think this helps educate our designs is understanding what the hunting season structure looks like in Washington, and then on top of that, this landowner specifically is an archery hunter? Are they a rifle hunter? And then is it similar to the Midwest where we have folks sitting in tree stands, or is it more mobile?
Yeah, those are all really good questions, Tim. That was a lot of the preliminary that I was talking with this landowner about. So the season structure is a little bit different than the Midwest, and I know I might not get this 100% accurate, but I'm just going based off of the info I got from the landowner and his preference on the season. I know that it's separated into different like date ranges where you pull a tag for X amount X season and you get these dates. Now the landowner that I worked with here, he is an archery hunter, and his goal for this property was to optimize early season hunting. So they're able to start the season that he's going to be hunting these properties in September, which is where you can kind of already get an idea. We're bringing in a lot of food to the property, and the setups are food based for the most part. So that was our goal with this property was let's try to optimize as many early season hunting locations as possible for those bow setups. And that's exactly what we kind of accomplished with our design here.
Well, it looks really, really good. I'm curious. You've got a whole section here to the to one corner where there's
Hmm.
not a lot of development going on, and I want you to highlight that. I know what's going on there because we talked about it briefly off air, but I've got a lot of folks with multi-use properties, and they wonder, well, how do we work around this? What's going on there in that spot with no development going on?
Yeah, so this section down here on the south of my screen now of stand number 5, where I have this thick white line, this is an area that they bring their cattle in, and they herd them up right down in here. And this white line is actually a fence line to block off the cattle from going into this section of the property. So what that was able to generate for us is basically an edge, not a habitat edge where you're going to have a break between two kinds of habitat, but a very nice sturdy fence that is going to influence travel along the edge of it, especially as we give them reasons to say like ridge hop here and go from one food source to the other, or come down off of the hilltop where we have all of that bedding.
Right, right. So, working with a working property, right? You're working with the hand that you've been dealt there. Cattle, I know for a lot of people is a major headache. But it's the reality that you're dealing with on a lot of these properties. So tell me about the deer movement that's going on already. Was the sign out there able to be read quite like you'd find in the Midwest, or was it a little bit different with just the terrain difference and the food difference going on out there?
Yeah, it was different compared to what I see in the Midwest. Not nearly as much and prevalent sign as far as like buck sign goes, and just because there wasn't the same type of habitat that we have here in Ohio to lay that sign. But as far as like bedding and deer travel goes, it was very similar to what we see in the Midwest. A couple areas to point out here. We have ponds in each of the corner of the property, and on the inside of the pond where it turned into the creeks, there's some really good natural pinch points, and those were both areas on the south and up onto the north here that had just very good natural deer flow. And then running parallel to these creek systems, there was just a lot of travel kind of moving down. And then very similar to just like you're expecting the especially like the south facing slopes to have some bedding. It was like that. And then on the north side where there's a little bit higher stem count right now, in the summertime where it's warmer, there's a lot of shade over here, so there's a lot of active bedding going on these northern ridge. So the actual characteristics of how deer are using the landscape is very similar. It's just problem solving in a little bit different way than what I'm used to back in Ohio.
Right. Very, very good. Very, very good. I'm curious about the food plots that you've got on the property. This is not a region that is, I think, known for food plotting, right?
Hmm.
So what's going to be going on with these food plots?
Yeah, so and I know I mentioned that goal here was to provide landowner with a lot of early season opportunities. That's what he was looking for on the property here, and you really nailed it. It's not an area that is well known for doing a lot of food plots, and there's not a lot of high quality food in the region. So adding that food is really going to take this property to the next level and going to provide the landowner with a lot of those early season opportunities. What you'll see with the food plot structure that we have is all of the food install that we're going to do. It's going to be in areas that there's going to be some land clearing that's going to be done. He has access to some equipment that's going to allow him to really put food plots wherever we need to. But all of the food plots are in areas that are close to the creek beds as possible to try to tap into that more fertile soil that will be receptive to the food plots based off of just the vegetation we had down there, the grasses and everything like that. And even in some of the open fields on another portion of the property we walked earlier in the day before this design, there are some clovers and things like that growing. So really just trying to tap into the same types of habitat structure where we're going to be implementing these food plots. And as far as how we have our food plots set up here, really our main goal is with this C kind of kidney bean shaped plot down in the bottom as our final destination, and the other three plots on the property being more pass-through style plots where you can kind of see with like the Y shape we have, and then just these little trail style plots of leading down into the main primary food source. So that way we're either able to hit them on the way to that or once they get here. Is really what our main goal is.
Right. Very good. Very good. Guys, any questions for Greg so far?
Greg, I think I know the answer, but maybe you can just touch on it with the access. And I love the access where we can do perimeter and hit on that. Are those are roads going through their existing, correct? Those
Yes,
white lines.
correct. Yep.
Okay.
So, yeah, these are all existing roads, and that's just they use a lot of these road systems throughout to get to different portions of their property when they're running cattle. So these
Hmm.
are just already well-established maintenance roads, and they all line up. These interior ones, although I mark them on the map, those aren't going to be ones that we're going to be using during the hunting season.
Right.
But as he needs to get in here and do any of the kind of bedding work or corridor work, getting the equipment in for that, he's going to be able to do so. But these outside roads really set up nice to give us that 360-degree access and allow
Mhm.
him to get in regardless of wind direction, regardless of what the deer are doing. It allows us to only hunt each location on the perfect weather conditions and just have very low impact access all the way around. I always try to shoot. My goal is I just call it the 80-20 rule, where I want to give deer at least 80% of the property and only use 20% or less. And we were able
Mhm.
to well more than accomplish that with just straight line access, very easy in and out, and have very low impact on that core part of the property in the center there.
Great. Yeah. No, I really like the access. That was one of the immediate things I was drawn to here with this being able to get at it with those roadways. It sets up very nicely.
Yeah, absolutely. What a stellar property for being able to be very, very low impact. I'm curious what the habitat type is like up on top of that ridge there, where it's a
Ye-
little bit more open, right? I'm wondering what's going on in there.
Yep. So it's really I don't even know if there's anything other than pines up on this top. It's if there is anything else, it's a majority of pine trees. And in these open little pockets, you do get a few grasses and some younger pines and things like that. And I know that we have a lot of designated bedding up in here, but really I do believe that this whole ridge system, especially once we bring in food, this is going to be the area that houses deer. And how I explained it to the landowner is that we're going to do our best to develop bedding, on the south slope here. We're going to focus on places that they want to bed when they want that sun exposure. And then up on the north side here, where there is a little bit higher stem count, let's just focus more so on leaving the shaded areas and focusing on giving them multiple entry exit routes to get down and have these direct paths of travel right to the food. And we'll just kind of be flexible and see how things react once we do bring in this food. And if we need to make that assessment of should we add in more specific bedding areas, or just the fact of, hey, we're not spending a lot of time in the majority of the property, and are those deer just going to kind of bunker down where they feel comfortable and funnel down into these food plots in the evening?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. Where I see open spots like that, that on an aerial look really open. In actuality, that's where I usually get to and find really great bedding cover. Like you're saying,
Yeah.
grasses mixed with young pines. I always tell people around here where we find, 2 and 3 foot tall pine trees, long leaf pines mixed in with like a broom sedge, blue stem kind of stuff. You're going to have deer bedding there.
Yeah.
That's where they're going to be. And when I see that, I think deer bedding, like they're going to be in that pocket right there towards the tip of that ridge. Um, it's interesting too, and I just want to point out, just from people who are interested in like forest stand improvement or timber stand improvement, that kind of thing, the difference in topography on those two slopes is so dramatic. You get the one side a little bit more sun, a little bit more prone to maybe a fire running through there every once in a while. That other slope, higher stem count, not a lot of disturbance going on there naturally, setting up better for a summertime type of bedding opportunity, right? So a lot going on there um, with this property. Greg, I've got to ask you, if you had to pick one stand location where you think you're going to get the picture, or where the landowner is going to send you the text this fall, right? Like, just got an arrow in one. Which stand location is that going to be?
That's tricky, just because there really are so many good ones. But I really do believe personally that it's going to come from, depending on the wind, and that's right back to the access. We have great setups for either a southerly or a northerly wind. I really like the opportunities for stand location number 2 up here and number 9, and then based off of the wind for the access, just because we're bringing in a lot of food down here in the C-shaped plot, and that's no doubt going to be the destination source. And I really do think that you're going to be able to get either a morning or evening hunt in stands 2 and number 9, and you can either get them going to the food or back from the food. And I think those are going to be the two plots that the buck is going to be hanging out in during shooting hours, when he's able to go and slip right in there and make it happen, whether it be a morning hunt or a night hunt. So the cool thing is that I personally, like I love the rut funnel style hunting, things like that. So like it's hard to ignore how great of a setup stand location number 5 here is going to be, just with the cattle fence and a direct line of travel between two plots, and with some bedding here, on any kind of wind we're getting off this ridge top, stand 5 is going to heat up as those bucks are starting to look for those does. But I would have to say, just from the early season perspective, number 2 and number 9 here, depending on the wind, are probably going to be a pretty sweet hunt come September.
What are we looking at as a rut time frame there? Are they working with a traditional kind of early November rut?
It was pretty similar, from what I gathered. Where we get it might shift a little bit, and they get a little bit different characteristics just because the bucks are traveling more. But yeah, the rut period is going to be right around that same time frame as we experience in the Midwest.
Okay. All right. Good deal. Guys, any follow-ups for Greg here?
Yeah, Greg, a quick point that I wanted to call out, and something I think you did a great job with here, is if you look at where the bedding is on the property, and then where your food sources are, and thinking about trying to kind of be between those 2 points, with the slopes as they are and the visibility that those deer would have, it's difficult. It would be very difficult to hunt on those direct lines of travel coming off the ridge straight down to the food sources. And that'd be tempting to try to do, but I think it could be something that'd be more harmful than good. So I love what you did, is because you kind of have those plots, smaller, more directional plots or trail plots throughout, you're actually lengthening that distance of travel before they get to that main food source. And you're really creating hunting opportunities on the edges. It's really become part of that travel route to the main food source, almost like a staging area, it isn't really there unless you put those secondary food sources in. So I think you created a travel route that otherwise probably wouldn't exist. I think that's a really nice job by you.
Thank you. Yeah, that was a nice thing, and that was one of the things I was trying to keep in mind is just because, they're bedding up here because they have such a great vantage point of what's going on. But using these creeks and that really thick stem count in the bottoms for our access and implementing the plots, like where our hunter access is, outside of that little trail we clear, honestly, if you were to walk down that trail, you're not going to be able to see probably 5 feet each direction into the woods just because of how thick it is on these creek bottoms. So that's what's so nice of you're really going to be able to come in and out, and they're not going to have any idea that you're there, and they're going to feel completely safe and secure in their bed.
Yeah, I'll build on that a little bit too. That what is the size of maybe one of those kill plots, your stands you liked that you highlighted? What is it? Is it a quarter acre, third acre? What do you got there
Yeah,
in each
so
of those?
they're right around that, either a quarter acre up to a half acre. They're a little bit
Yeah.
bigger than a typical kill plot that I'm getting here, in the Midwest in Ohio. If I'm going on just like a little flat bench or something in the hills,
Mhm.
they're a little bit larger just because the idea of there's not really any good food. So I wanted to make
Yeah.
sure that these kill plots weren't going to get overbrowsed. And by the time season gets here, they're all burnt up and there's nothing left. So they are a little bit bigger than general, but they
Hmm.
are. I really try to hit on let's make them more long than they are wide. So it really does
Yeah.
still influence that travel through to our larger plot down here.
Yeah, and I like the orientation. I think Tim touched on that as well. The elongated plots. Sometimes when it comes to actually implementing those and getting them built, is they letting them wind a little bit and maybe keeping some of the trees within them, just so that they are a very, they feel like cover to the deer. They're a continuation of that corridor, which I think is why you probably are drawn to those, and they will be successful for this owner come season.
Yeah, definitely. Yep, and that's the other nice thing, about being in that secure, thick habitat down on those creek bottoms. Same with our access; they should feel very, very secure as they travel through these plots leading down to the main one for that evening feed.
Greg, last question that I've got for you, and you mentioned this earlier, right? Like the vegetation was very different, and the way that you solve problems on this property was a little bit different because of being in a different terrain type, right? I'm curious, what would you say was like the biggest challenge or the biggest problem to be solved when it comes to this property?
I'm gonna go right back to the food. Just there wasn't a lot of it, so I knew that it was needed, especially just because he prefers to hunt that early season on this piece. And then how can we add in enough food but not disturb the property?
Right.
That kind of like combination of solving that problem was like the big ticket item for us. And thankfully, just the way that things laid out, and that's I spent a lot of time looking at the map beforehand, and I try to draw up a few different versions of a hypothetical design before I ever even put boots on the ground. So that way I'm kind of either confirming or denying those assumptions once I make it to the property, and then kind of use the landowner's input based off of those hypotheticals that I drew up.
Right. Right. Very good. Well, Greg, thanks for sharing this. I think this is going to be a very, very happy landowner come this fall. I did forget to say at the beginning, just because you own, 100 acres or whatever this is, does not mean that you can take this plan that Greg drew up and put it down onto your property, copy and paste style. And if you're listening to this and you're wondering, what are we talking about with these travel plots? I don't know what's going on. Head over to the YouTube channel where you can see this, on full display for you there, where you can actually see what we're talking about as we have this discussion. So, guys, thanks for joining me today.